pumps didn't fail, they were killed. 1 second my basement was dry, humming like a fortress holding back the storm of the century, and the next, the entire system went dead. No warning, no flicker, just silence, thick, wrong, impossible silence. I sprinted into the rain, heart pounding harder than the thunder overhead, following the buried conduit to the community junction box. The wind nearly ripped the door from my hand when I opened it. That's when I saw it. My breaker had been forced off, secured with a bright HOA padlock, and the name engraved on it told me everything, but the part that terrified me most was realizing why she did it. Claire Harlan didn't run our neighborhood, she patrolled it. If Maple Ridge Estates had a throne, she sat on it with a laminated scepter and a smile that never reached her eyes. My first real glimpse of who she was came months before the storm on a Saturday morning, so peaceful it felt staged. I'd barely finished installing a discreet discharge pipe, painted to match the foundation hidden behind a hedge, when she appeared at my door like she'd materialized from thin HOA air. "Mr. Cole," she said, skipping hello entirely. "You've installed an unapproved exterior modification." She spoke like she was delivering a medical diagnosis. When I pointed out the pipe was nearly invisible, she flipped through her clipboard like a prosecutor searching for the right statute to weaponize. Bylaw 7, Section 4, Subsection C. The aesthetic integrity of drainage solutions must remain harmonious with community design. It was the first time I'd ever heard someone say drainage solutions as a threat. I laughed. She didn't. That's when the shift happened, barely perceptible but unmistakable. Her chin lifted, her jaw tightened. My refusal wasn't just non-compliance. To her, it was insubordination. Over the next weeks, laminated notices multiplied like mold spores, noise violations, visual disharmony, unauthorized hydraulic acoustics, each more absurd than the last. And each one made something crystal clear. Claire didn't enforce rules. She enforced control. I moved into Maple Ridge Estates for one reason: stability. After a decade of contract work on power infrastructure hopping between cities, substations, and emergency grid failures, I wanted a place where nothing unexpected happened at 2 a.m. A quiet cul-de-sac, predictable neighbors, and a house with enough space for a proper workshop. That was the whole dream. The HOA brochure promised order, harmony, and uniformity. At the time, those words sounded comforting. The house itself was perfect for me. A wide garage I could turn into a control center, a basement I could fortify against flooding, and enough electrical capacity to feed the kinds of systems only an engineer with too much pride would build. After a near-disastrous storm years earlier, and a power outage that left my previous basement soaked, I swore I'd never again trust luck or municipal infrastructure to keep my home safe. So, I overbuilt triple redundant commercial pumps wired on their own dedicated circuit, armored conduit running straight to the community junction box, a manual override port on the exterior wall, and in the garage, the crown jewel, my portable generator system, oversized, over-engineered, and absolutely unnecessary for a normal household, which was fine by me. Normal households flood. At first, Maple Ridge lived up to its promise. Clean sidewalks, predictable trash pickup, neighbors who waved politely from a distance but didn't pry. But peace in a neighborhood like this is fragile, surface-level tranquility, hiding a rigid hierarchy enforced through clipped emails and fine schedules. The crack appeared the day Claire Harlan discovered my discharge pipe. Not because it was truly a problem, she just needed something to flex authority over. After that, small tensions snowballed. Random compliance reminders appeared in my mailbox. Claire began walking past my house more often, clipboard in hand, pausing to inspect things no one else had ever noticed: the angle of my hose reel, the tone of my mulch, the decibel level of my air compressor. It wasn't about the pipe anymore. It was about proving she could control me. And I'll admit it, pushing back felt good. Too good. By the time the storm warnings rolled in, by the time the sky darkened and the neighborhood braced for the worst, I already knew Claire had a personal stake in putting me back in line. What I didn't know yet was how far she was willing to go. The first sign of trouble came quietly, too quietly, to feel like a real attack. A laminated notice appeared on my door one morning, accusing me of an unauthorized drainage alteration. I almost laughed. The pipe was hidden behind a hedge. You'd need a drone and a detailed treasure map to spot it. Still, Claire had found it, photographed it, and filed it. I shrugged and used the notice as a coaster in the garage. 2 days later, another violation arrived. Unapproved mechanical acoustics. Translation: she didn't like the faint hum my pumps made while self-testing. Then came a community-wide email reminding residents that visual harmony begins with responsible homeowners. No names attached, but every neighbor knew exactly who she meant. The messages weren't aggressive. Not yet. They were just little taps on the glass reminders that she was watching. But the mini twist came when I caught her car idling across the street one evening. She wasn't there for a walk. She was observing, evaluating, targeting, and now she knew I wasn't intimidated. The shift from passive-aggressive to outright invasive happened faster than I expected. I stepped outside one afternoon and found Claire crouched near my side yard, her phone angled toward the back corner of my foundation. "Can I help you?" I asked. She didn't flinch. "Routine exterior review," she said, like she was a building inspector instead of a suburban monarch. "That's private property," I reminded her. She gave me a tight smile, the kind people use right before they issue a parking ticket. "Anything visible from any community-accessible vantage point is subject to compliance checks," which was HOA code for "I can come onto your lawn whenever I feel like it." She marched off without another word, but the fallout hit the next morning, a formal demand to submit engineering drawings of my pump system to the Architectural Review Committee. Drawings, diagrams, electrical specs, all for a buried, nearly invisible setup. I ignored it, and the mini twist. That night at 10 p.m., a flashlight beam flickered across my foundation again. She'd come back, not to inspect, to search. A week later, the first big storm rolled in, a warm-up compared to what was coming, but enough to test everyone's systems. My pumps handled it flawlessly, cycling like champions. When the rain tapered off, I stepped outside to check the exterior panels. That's when I saw it. A bright red temporary shoot-off notice zip-tied to my breaker housing. Not from the electric company, from the HOA. Stamped neatly at the bottom, filed by C. Harlan. The breaker was still on, but the message was obvious. "We can turn this off whenever we want." It was a shot across the bow. I documented everything, photos, timestamps, the whole forensic spread. My gut told me Claire was testing boundaries, figuring out what she could get away with. Then came a second letter, this one more threatening. "Unauthorized power draw from community-managed utilities must cease immediately." She used the word immediately twice bolded. Mini twist later that afternoon, I found the community junction box slightly ajar. Someone had been inside, someone who didn't belong. The breaker was untouched, but the message was clear. She wasn't just threatening interference. She was scouting her next move. The next escalation wasn't subtle at all. A city inspector knocked on my door, clipboard, hard hat, and the unmistakable look of someone who'd been pressured into a pointless errand. "Mr. Cole, we received a report about an unsafe private power installation tied into community infrastructure." I didn't need to guess who filed it. I brought him to the utility room, walked him through the system, cited NEC standards, pointed out the dedicated circuit, the armored conduit, the isolation measures. His eyebrows kept rising. "This is, frankly, one of the cleanest residential installs I've ever seen," he said. I'm not sure why we were called out. We both knew why. Mini twist as he left, he muttered, "Your HOA president insisted we shut it down. We told her that's not how any of this works." Claire had failed to use bylaws, so she tried to use the city, which meant she was running out of conventional weapons. And people like her get dangerous when they feel their authority slipping. When the historic storm finally hit, it didn't arrive, it attacked. Sheets of rain slashed sideways across the neighborhood. Gutters overflowed within minutes. Phones lit up with emergency alerts. Neighbors scrambled their flimsy store-bought pumps, choking on the rising water. Inside my basement, though, perfect. Green lights, stable pit level, pumps humming like a symphony. Then, instantly, every hum died. Not slowed, not overloaded. Killed. My stomach dropped. I bolted outside, fighting through winds strong enough to tilt me sideways. I traced the conduit across my yard to the community junction box. Even through the storm's roar, I knew something was wrong. The cabinet door was unlocked, actually swinging. And when I yanked it open, my worst suspicion wasn't just confirmed, it was practically bragging. My dedicated breaker had been slammed off, locked in place by a shining orange HOA padlock. A laminated notice still dry under its plastic declared my system immediately suspended. Signed by Claire Harlan. The mini twist wasn't the sabotage. It was the realization that she'd done it during a life-threatening weather emergency. That was the moment everything shifted, because she hadn't just crossed a boundary, she declared war, and I already knew exactly how I would answer. The beast fired up with a roar that cut straight through the storm, deep, mechanical, unignorable. Its frame vibrated like a living thing as the diesel engine surged to life, drowning out thunder. I dragged the feeder cable through the rain, locked it into the manual override port on my exterior wall, and sprinted back to the control panel. 3, 2, 1. The pumps thundered awake, blasting a jet of water out the discharge pipe so forcefully it carved a channel through my mulch. My entire property shuddered under the sudden return of power. That was when Claire emerged. She stormed across her yard in a bright red raincoat umbrella, flipping inside out as she screamed over the generator's roar. "Mr. Cole, this is an illegal commercial power installation. You are violating noise ordinances, parking regulations." I leaned casually on the trailer. "Good news, Claire, I'm no longer on your grid. You locked me out." "I simply complied with your demand." Her face contorted. "I'll have the police shut this down." As if summoned by her outrage, blue and red lights blurred through the rain. A cruiser rolled to the curb. Officer Boyd, broad-soaked, exhausted, stepped out, taking in the chaos with a long, miserable blink. The showdown had officially begun. Officer Claire shouted, waving him over like she'd summoned him personally. "This man is operating a dangerous, unlicensed industrial generator in a residential subdivision. He is eroding shared property. I cut her off. He's saving homes." Boyd squinted at the beast, then at the cable running into my pump system. "Mr. Cole, mind explaining what's going on?" I showed him everything. The photos of the unlocked community junction box, the HOA padlock sealing my breaker to off, the laminated suspension notice, the time-stamped moment my pumps died, the water level chart on my basement monitor app, the emergency alerts still buzzing on my phone. Claire jabbed a finger at me. "He's misusing community-managed utilities." "I wasn't using them," I said calmly, "because the HOA president cut the power feeding my flood defenses during an active emergency." That changed Boyd's posture completely. He walked to the junction box himself, inspected the lock, the breaker position, the laminated notice. He didn't say a word, just inhaled sharply as he took it in. Then neighbors began to appear. Henderson soaked and frantic. "Officer, his generator is the only reason my man cave isn't underwater, Mrs. Alvarez. He powered our backup pump. Without him, our kids' playroom would have flooded. Dave, officer, Claire's been trying to shut him down for months." The officer turned slowly toward her, and the shift in his expression was unmistakable. "Miss Harlan," Officer Boyd said, voice flat as wet concrete. "Did you cut power to Mr. Cole's pump system tonight?" She bristled. "As HOA president, I am fully authorized to enforce covenants. That's not an answer." She blinked, thrown off. "Those circuits are part of the community. They feed his emergency equipment. And you interfered during a declared severe weather event." Claire opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out. Boyd stepped forward, lowering his voice just enough to sound lethal. "Ma'am, you need to understand something. Tampering with residential power during a flood emergency isn't an HOA issue. It can qualify as reckless endangerment. If anyone had been injured or if serious damage occurred, we'd be discussing criminal charges." The color drained from her face. "And for the record," he added, "I'm not shutting down that generator. It's the only thing out here doing its job." A murmur spread through the neighbors. Relief, vindication, satisfaction. Claire took a step back, then another, as if the entire neighborhood had suddenly become hostile terrain, which, judging by their faces, it had. One last crack of lightning split the sky. In that flash, I saw her clearly defeated, soaked, undone, not by a bylaw battle, but by the simple truth catching up to her. She turned and fled toward her house, slipping in the mud on the way up her own front steps. And just like that, the storm wasn't the only thing losing power that night. By sunrise, Maple Ridge Estates looked like two different neighborhoods. On one side of the street, mine lawns were damp but intact. Basements were dry. Exhausted homeowners stood on porches, clutching coffee mugs, staring at the fading storm with that hollow-eyed look people get after a near miss. On the other side, Claire's side, every lawn was a muddy disaster. Water pooled in driveways. The storm drains had overflowed, channeling runoff straight through her prized landscaping. Her award-winning geranium bed wasn't a bed anymore. It was a brown crater where mulch and roots had surrendered to the flood, and the neighborhood saw everything. The beast idled quietly in my driveway, cooling after an all-night marathon. Cables snaked across the yards like lifelines still plugged into my neighbors' garages. People who barely spoke to each other before were now gathered in clusters, trading stories about water levels near disasters, and the moment they realized my generator had saved them. Mrs. Alvarez brought me a thermos of cinnamon coffee. Henderson slapped me on the back so hard, I almost spilled it. Even Mr. Lee, the guy known for silently mowing his lawn at dawn every Saturday, walked over and gave me an honest, deep bow of gratitude. I didn't set out to be a hero. I just didn't like my basement getting flooded. But the neighborhood, they treated me like I'd single-handedly kept us afloat. And Claire, her curtains remained tightly closed. Even from across the street, you could feel the shift. The authority she once wielded like a blade now hung limp and useless. The block had seen what she was capable of and what she wasn't. Her power had drained away faster than the water in her basement. Around mid-morning, a white utility truck pulled up city seal on the door, not HOA branding. 2 contractors stepped out, Marcus and Raffi, the guys I'd hired months earlier when I first built the pump system. Both looked like they'd walked straight out of a hard hat calendar, broad-shouldered heavy tool belts ready for war. Marcus whistled low. Heard the HOA got creative last night. That's one word for it, I replied. He lifted his tablet, grinning. Well, the city wants to get ahead of this. We filed your emergency permit at 6 a.m. They processed it in 20 minutes. 20, I repeated. That's impossible, Raffi snorted. Not when the electrical supervisor hates HOAs meddling with infrastructure. Within minutes, they were marking lines, taking measurements, and mapping out a new conduit route, one that bypassed the community junction box entirely. A fully separate meter. A direct tie into the municipal grid. Everything above board documented, city approved, and most importantly, untouchable by the HOA. If anyone interferes with this line, Marcus said the fines start around 20 grand per incident. More if it's during an emergency. He didn't need to say her name. I just smiled. By noon, the city inspector himself arrived, clipboard in hand, vest soaked from the storm. He reviewed every aspect of the new plan, nodded with genuine satisfaction, and left with one parting message. If your HOA ever touches your power again, call us first. We'll handle it. That was the moment Claire stepped outside. Hair frizzy, blazer, wrinkled shoes ruined from the night's mud. She marched toward us, holding another document, no doubt some last-ditch violation notice. Marcus didn't even let her speak. Ma'am, he said politely, but firmly, we're working under city authority today. Any interference with this installation becomes a municipal issue, not an HOA one. Her jaw flexed. Raffi added, this line belongs to the city, not you, not the board. Don't touch it. She froze. And when she looked at me, it wasn't anger anymore. It was fear. Without another word, she turned and walked back inside, shoulders sagging like someone carrying the full weight of her collapsing kingdom. Claire resigned a week later. The email was classic HOA theater grand declarations about personal health, temporary sabbatical, and needing time to refocus. But nobody bought it. Not after the night she'd cut power during a life-threatening storm. Not after the city showed up and installed a line she could never touch. Her influence evaporated. Her allies ghosted her. Her flower beds never recovered. But the neighborhood, it came alive. People talked more, shared tools, checked in. The storm had forced connections that years of proximity never did. And somehow, without planning or intention, my driveway became the unofficial gathering spot. The beast got a new nickname, the Ridge Grid. Kids asked to see the big switches. Adults asked if I'd help them install backup systems of their own. Someone even suggested a neighborhood block party themed around grid independence. One quiet evening after the dust settled and the city completed the permanent line, Marcus, Raffi, Dave, and I sat on the open tailgate of my truck, cold beers in hand. To Maple Ridge, Dave toasted. To independent power, Raffi added. To fewer laminated notices, Marcus joked. I raised my bottle last. To spite, I said. The cleanest renewable energy source known to man. Laughter echoed down the street. And as the sun dipped behind the rooftops, casting long, warm light over a community that had finally woken up, I realized something simple and almost stupidly profound. In a neighborhood obsessed with perfect lawns and matching mailboxes, the thing people valued most wasn't conformity. It was the guy who showed up when the water started to rise, and that no HOA covenant could ever regulate.